say so too. Yeah, just in the last like 3 years, I think she's just really become this. Her career has just skyrocketed.
She just had 2 films come out recently that have my other favorite stars who aren't super well known yet. One is named Hunter King, and she did a mystery with her.
Oh, they play sisters, don't they? Or do
Yeah,
they?
it's Nikki and Nora's Sister Sluice. Yeah.
Yes.
And then she did a rom-com with Tyler Hines, who the Hallmark fans, if he did anything wrong, they would defend him until the end of the world. And I would love to meet the guy. I'm sure he's so lovely and down to earth. But how was it with Miss Rhiannon Fish? I think she is so talented and sweet and funny. How is she to work with, and is she as down to earth as she is in the films?
She wins over the crew immediately, to the point that the male leads probably get a little jealous, because she talks to the grips, she talks to the PAs, she wants to go out and have a. She's Australian. She loves to, not to say that all Australians do this, but she really wants to socialize, and she wants to go out and have a beer when you wrap. And she has like, and you probably see this in her face, she has this mischievous type of smirk that she's kind of bratty in a really cute, awesome way, and she brings that to these characters. So I find that she has a whole lot of levels going on. Again, very funny, but boy, does she win over the crew. Everyone just absolutely loves working with her. And like, not to say that there's a scale of maintenance with certain actors, but she's like, there's no maintenance. Like she's just so, again, down to earth. Very awesome. It's funny you mentioned Tyler Haynes. Tyler Haynes.
Tyler Hines.
Tyler Hines. Yeah. So I did a movie with him. Totally not a Hallmark movie. And it was called Hot Wired in Suburbia.
Mm-hmm.
And he's amazing because he's all about the quirks. So when he comes on board as a character, the things he brings to it are like, he was going to play someone who was almost like he seduces a high school girl into hot wiring cars. But his take on it wasn't to play the handsome, type guy that he could totally play. He played it with a bit of a lisp. He gave himself a little bit of like a bum leg, very elements that were almost like psychotic, because he was playing a villain. And the way he layered that up really blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
So his style, I think, is almost to subvert it, if that makes sense. So he takes the usual character on the page, but what he brings to that character, I just like sit back and see what he's going to do, because and it's always a surprise, which is I think that's the fun of working with him. Some of these actors that really give it all and bring such an extra layer of creativity to it.
So when you find out that you're going to be directing this one film, do you know who is going to be starring in it before you get to set, or are you part of the casting process?
It's a combination. So I've done some where I'm aware of the names, and the names are decided upon ahead of time. So once Hallmark signs off on those names, it makes my job easier when I put together lists for the best friend or the sister or the boyfriend, because we got to build all the supporting characters around that lead. So, we can't have like two brunettes that look exactly the same if one's a lead and one's the sister, and that all impacts.
Yeah.
So that's something that we got to think about. But for the most part, like this last one I did, Cindy Busby was attached from the very beginning. We knew that she was going to be the lead, and if anything, it was based on her schedule. Where can we slot it in to get Cindy Busby to be in the movie, and we build it around Cindy. I think with Rhiannon, I think she was probably like one in five on the list. Sometimes if it's lower budget, it might go with the idea of let's go Canadian with it.
Yeah.
I think that's how she kind of got started, but she's just so incredibly good. Now she skyrocketed into the big Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
So I find these lower budget rom-coms can sometimes be the stepping stone onto the bigger Hallmark movies. And like I said, we've seen Rhiannon's career just skyrocket for obvious reasons.
Is there any stars that you would love to work with that you haven't had the chance to, like a Lacey Chabert?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Anybody like that?
I think she's probably one of the biggest I haven't had the chance to work with. I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with Alison Sweeney and Nikki DeLoach and Kimberly Sestad, who was incredibly fun, and Cindy, of course. So I think Lacey would be, again, I've heard amazing things, and boy, does she keep busy. So I think she would probably be at the top of my list as, you know, with someone that I would love to work with. It's funny from the guy perspective. I did do one with, Andrew Walker, who I thought was absolutely fantastic. He would push me in funny ways, though. It's like, because he loves to ad lib, and like everyone else, he wants to elevate the material.
Mm-hmm.
So he would literally come up and like, listen, Jason, I've done a lot of these Hallmark movies. They'll let us do it. I'm sure they'll let us do it. I'll take the blame. I'll take the blame, Jason. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's change that line and do this and this. So he's very much, again, a partner in crime, but it was hilarious how he would push me. And that, by the way, was when we did My Christmas Family Tree.
Yeah.
So yeah, working with him, it was all about, again, how can we take some of these scenes and sometimes just make them better, I think was the bottom line. They're quick, though. We shoot these in 15 days. So there's times we have to do that on the fly, which can be stressful for maybe some first-time directors. But I've been around the block, so I kind of get it.
Yeah. Seeing him in all his films, specifically in Three Wise Men and a Baby, you can tell that he can just go off the cuff with anybody.
Yeah.
And I had a feeling seeing everything. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I got a whiny dog and that I had to grab. She was being a little loud.
Not a problem. Hi, buddy. But look at that. So are you going to be a star too? No. But
yeah, he's excellent at that. It's definitely that ping pong of dialogue that he loves to do, and it's very snappy. And again, he loves the ad libs.
Yeah,
Andrew.
So has there been one star where they've been pretty hard to work with on a film, or hard to get, like hard to fit in? Like I have this film and this series and this where you wanted to have them, but their schedule wouldn't quite allow it.
Yeah, that happens with Chris Russell, who gets used a lot by a friend of mine, Christy Wolf likes putting him in movies. And I did one of his first ones called Heartfelt, where he was more of a villain. And the guy's an Adonis. Like he's beautiful to look at. Women love this guy to death. And he's quite funny. And his schedule was pretty busy. So at one point we were looking at having him in a movie, but he was filming one in Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. So, and some of that might be based on sales. Also, like some of these guys like Chris, they sell well internationally. So they want to get those actors nailed down, because for foreign sales, they might honestly just make the producers more money compared to going with someone who's more of an unknown. So that's come up a lot. And there have been actors, again, like I've been blessed to work with a lot of incredible actors, and once or twice I get stuck with someone maybe who's not as much of a team player. Maybe who just wants to go off in their trailer and maybe not run lines with the actors, or maybe they have like a 3-picture deal and they're just kind of like floating through it a little bit more. Interestingly, I don't mind saying this, I find it's usually the male actors. If I have a bad apple, it's almost always a male actor compared to the female leads. Every female lead I've worked with has just been incredible with the professionalism and the amount of work they put into it. Yeah, so it's interesting, but again, that doesn't happen all the time. That I have maybe a male lead who is just kind of coasting through, thinking he's maybe the eye candy, but in actuality, it's like, no. If you dive into it, you can still make something of this. And we always want to play. We always want to look at how we can elevate it.
Mm-hmm. Guys like him, and say a Ryan Pavey, right?
Mm-hmm.
The women love those guys. They love those guys to death. And there's not very many guys who love these films. So as a person who makes them, do you have any favorite ones that you watch any time you see them on TV that you haven't made?
I don't think so. You mean like something like I wish I directed it type thing?
Yeah. So let's say, like, what would you have done with, say, a Three Wise Men?
Mm-hmm.
Would you have done something different with that, with
Oh,
a coloring or something like that?
Now, Three Wise Men, they, as we know, they knocked that out of the ballpark. That wasn't just, I think, a Hallmark big win. That was a big win for television movies that year, because it did so incredibly well. It's I would like to think I would have directed it much along the same way. I had the opportunity of working with Kimberly Sustad right after that. Just as it was coming out, actually, I was directing her in a movie, and she was a co-writer of that one. And she's incredibly funny, but it's a different type of comedy compared to like a Rhiannon Fish, or say like a Cindy Busby. Kimberly's very much like, she can have a cynical streak and almost like this kind of like lone wolf element that's so incredibly cool. So that was for Game of Love, which I was quite happy with how that turned out. But yeah, she definitely brought her own experiences as a mom to that, and I think in some ways, I mean, I don't mind saying this, if it's those type of projects, and I think Kimberly should actually direct. When they're so close to the material and they understand it and they get the comedy and they've actually lived it. And in that case, I mean, it was experiences that she lived as a mother. I think, maybe sometimes, it should be a female director who actually has written the material and is directing it. It's interesting though, with Hallmark, you don't see that as much. I don't see it as much of having that. It's like the visionary director who's written the script and they've also directed it. I don't see that happening too often with Hallmark.
No. There is one that I think did it. Didn't Chrissy Wolf write one?
Yes, she's good point. Yeah, so Chrissy's definitely done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she uses Cindy a lot. And it got to the point where I'm like, watching, believe it was called Yellowstone Romance, and we had the awesome Chris Russell, and I'm like, where's Cindy at?
Yeah, totally. She's teamed them up.
They were just boom.
Yeah.
But,
they did Chasing Waterfalls. I was one of the writers on that, and again, that was a Cindy and Chris team up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the Hallmark audience, like they, there's times that they fall in love with those type of couples, and I think, and they appreciate it sometimes if you see that couple in one movie and then you see them again in another movie, and that type of repetition brings smiles to faces. So it's it's always interesting, that element to it. I think that's why we almost have like this staple of Hallmark stars. And by the way, they all talk about it now, like going to Christmas Con is a thing.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to Cindy and she's talking about, her and Ben Hollingsworth had made a Christmas movie together. The fan base is just so incredibly huge now. It just seems to keep growing, and people want a big virtual hug when they watch these movies. And it's kind of like becoming like a Comic-Con, except again, like these Christmas cons are just so picking up. And it is like those Hallmark heartthrobs are definitely getting their names out there. That's for sure.
I have a lot of friends, and I'm going to, should I name drop them? Yeah, let's just do it. Dara from Dear Hallmark. She is well known. And then we have Shannon and Catherine and Sarah. They all go to all the cons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they went to one called Rama Drama.
Oh, fun.
And me being me, I'm like, am I going to fit in there with all these women? Because I'm 24. I am not the, say, demographic for the Hallmark films. But I think that next year I'm going to have to go just to see everybody.
Yeah.
Want to basically say, hi, I love your films. And there's a couple where I'm like, I know it's going to be 4-hour waits, but it's going to be worth it. So would you show up? Would you show up to any of those if you were invited as a writer or anything?
Totally. I totally would. You know what my wife would love is if they do these Hallmark cruises. A friend of mine, Willie Ames, he's from like Eight Is Enough and Charles in Charge, and Winnie Hung, his wife. Their story actually became a Hallmark movie. And they wrote it together, and he just did like a cruise where he was talking about the script and kind of like a guest speaker. And my wife loves cruises. I would love to do a Hallmark cruise where I could, be a guest speaker, and we take a cruise down to LA, and I get to talk about making movies and maybe the script writing. I love all that stuff. I also work as a teacher too. So, I mean, I'm an open book with any of this. And I think it's always fun for the audience to understand some of the behind the scenes.
If I'm not mistaken, there is a Hallmark cruise that they had to open up a second cruise for that is run by, I think it's Andrew Walker.
Oh, fun.
Who's doing that. So potentially it's a win for you and your wife, but more your wife.
I'll reach out to Andrew and ask when the next one is. I think the cruise season just ended, at least here in Canada. But yeah, I think that would be a blast. I just really love that type of stuff, and I think again the fan base seems to really connect with it, and yeah, I love the idea of Hallmark cruises. Why not?
So straying away from the rom-com verse, all right?
Mm-hmm.
As a filmmaker and as a film critic,
yes,
you know that we're very honest with what we think.
Mm-hmm.
Does any of that really rub you the wrong way, or do you see it as we are doing our jobs?
Oh, as critics?
Yes. So say we don't like your film because of this, and this. Do you use that in your next film to try and make it a little bit better, or do you just say, hey, it didn't hit them in the right way, but hey, this film is going to hit everybody a different way from each one to each one. So how do you look at what we say about your films?
It's a very good point. I did one called oh boy, and again it has Christmas in the title. It was like it was a sliding doors type movie, A Tale of Two Christmases.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. I came on board that movie. Had Kirsten Hansen was fantastic, my exec, and I had a good cast. But I knew that the concept itself, structurally in the script, didn't have issues per se, but it was a plot that you had to fully concentrate on, because what happens is that the lead misses a plane and it branches off into two parallel Hallmark stories.
Mm-hmm.
One where she, finds a guy from the city and she goes to a city Christmas party. The other where she made plane ride and she goes back to her small town where she meets up with her, boyfriend from high school who's always loved her. And that was an example of one that I knew the feedback when it came out is that'll be a little harder for people to follow, because I think sometimes with Hallmark movies, I don't want to say that some people use it as just having it in the background and they don't just really sit down on their couch. They could be making dinner, they could be playing with their kids, and it's just always on. And because of the focus that was needed with that one, I knew we would get some flack. Mm-hmm. So based on that, I